Everyone. Welcome back to the latest edition of We've All Done It. I am so excited to have Miss Faye McCray joining us today because we are going to get into talking about work-life balance. I love whether or not that even is something that's real. How do we have healthy ambition without losing ourselves in the process? Because I know I have healthy ambition. I don't know if I always have healthy balance. So I am looking forward to having this conversation with you today. Faye, how are you?
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So before we jump into why people should listen to you, or maybe what we are going to do is why should people listen to you? Tell us a little bit about who you are and some of your experience in this space.
I don't know necessarily if people should listen to me, but I do think that people find themselves a lot in my story, which is why I'm being so kind of open and transparent about sharing it. So, I have always considered myself a really ambitious person. I went to law school, I practiced law for 10 years. Then I had a fantastic career in media and journalism and entrepreneurship, and just found myself at sort of a breaking point. I had been doing all the things, not taking enough time to take care of myself, not taking enough time for the things that I loved, and just reached a point where I had to have some honest conversations about about sort of my habits, how I had gotten to that point in my work journey and what I needed to do to change. So, I find most lessons worth listening to hard earned. And these were definitely hard earned lessons
Yeah.
for me. My breaking point actually got me in the hospital. I was very, very sick with anemia. I was having heart palpitations, not just from the stress, but of sort of neglecting my health in favor of sort of aggressively pursuing success. And just, I think, not everyone sort of gets the benefit. I know it doesn't sound like a benefit of reaching a moment like that, but it was a beautiful moment that just caused me to be introspective and reflective on my life up until that point.
So it's interesting because you're not the first person I know of who has ended up having some significant health crisis that ends up being the kind of watershed moment of like, what the hell is like, what am I doing? Like, how did I get here? WTF? Um, I can say for myself, fortunately, I didn't end up in the hospital, but I ended up in urgent care a lot because I ended up in a position where stress was so high. I kept having skin infections. Like I kept breaking out in really strange places. And it was stress related because the minute I changed my job, guess what went away?
Yeah, yeah. Stress
And
can do.
I've never had it again.
Yeah, it's wild what stress can do to your body.
So when you had this pivot point, tell me a little bit more. So because obviously this is a passion for you. So, what ended up happening in your journey that people can say, "Hey, I'm here. I've been there." Like, what were the big steps you had to take to say, "This is not the right path for me. I need to choose a different course"?
Yeah. I think I'm just an all-in person, right? Like I'm just the type of person that like when there's a task in front of me, I'm like, yes, like I'm gonna do the thing and pour all of myself into it. There are so many different reasons for this. And I usually kind of point back to growing up. My mom was just an incredibly wonderful and ambitious woman. Her and my dad split, and as a part of sort of her coming into her own as a woman, she went back to school and at 41 years old, and she got her bachelor's and her master's and just had this fantastic career. And for me, I was just a little girl witnessing this, like, yes, this is like what it means to be this powerful woman. So for me, witnessing that, I knew there were no excuses for the things that I wanted to achieve in life. I remember I used to tell myself that all the time. If she did this with 3 kids, like I can do X. So I just kind of went charging full force into my career, and into my work life, to the exclusion of almost everything else, right? I kind of got in a space of like, what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? And sort of my kind of big uh-oh moment was just being in a role that just required kind of an always on sort of culture, because there were just everything was on fire at any given moment, kind of one of those corporate environments. And I felt it was a big role, and I found myself, really, really committed to sort of fixing all the things, and having that point of sort of neglecting my health and then getting sick, being in the hospital, getting iron infusions. I remember the infusions were actually on a floor where people were being treated for cancer. So there were people at various stages of the battle, fighting
Yeah.
for their lives. And I'm wondering about Wi-Fi. Like, can I take a meeting from here? Am I able to like
Girl,
get
you were like the walking European meme of an American, right? Like
to
that,
work?
like my closest friend, I tease her. She actually was going into surgery and was still on her phone trying
I
to
was
cut a
like,
deal.
set up
And I
my
was like,
laptop.
you are the meme.
It
You are
was the
the one
work.
we make
It was
fun
the work.
of.
So my husband's sitting in the corner of the room looking at me like, WTF? Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing? Like, this isn't okay. And it was
Yeah.
almost like somebody punched me in the face. I was like, am I
Yeah.
crazy? Like, what am I? Like, I'm powering up this laptop to have this meeting at my most vulnerable moment, witnessing all of these beautiful humans, kind of fighting for their lives. Why am I doing this? Like, why do I feel the need to be so busy? Why am I so buried in this? Like, what are all the reasons that I feel like this is more urgent than being alive and taking care of myself?
Yeah.
So that became a really, really strong moment for me. And I think then looking around, I'm a mom, I love and adore them. I have three beautiful sons. My oldest is getting ready to go to college. He's in high school. And I was like, I've missed too much, and I don't want to miss anymore, like being buried in this work. So I think, that began again, that sort of moment of like, how did I get here? And how do I get out? You know?
So what was so clearly this is the moment where you are starting to say, okay,
Yeah.
boundaries have to shift. Like what I am allowing in my life has to be different. Who I am in my life has to be different. So what was the initial reception of whether I'm interested in your workplace, and then also in your family, because again, we all kind of play roles and, we kind of create these little cultures around ourselves. What was that like for you when you first started to come out and say, I want to be different
Yeah.
in my life? How did that play out with these different audiences?
Yeah, I think that the people around me saw the toll that it was taking on me, like how glued I was to my laptop and my phone and all of the things. So I think in my mind, I sort of worked it up as like these people are going to think I'm nuts. They're going to think, you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And top amongst that was my dad because he's a police officer, career civil servant, who's retired now. And I was like, he's definitely gonna be like, you're wild, like you're insane. What are you doing? And he was like, yes, and my husband's always kind of been like, whatever's going to make you happy and healthy, go do that thing. So he was supportive, but unanimously across my life, I have wonderful relationships with women, like in my networking groups, and everything was like, I think they believed in me taking this bet on myself and kind of taking the leap and like figuring out what was next. Almost more than I did. But I think a lot of that too was just witnessing the toll. And I think my family missed me, right? Like when you're so engrossed in all of these things, you're not as present for like, I could, whatever. You're looking at your phone, you're doing all of these things. So I think they wanted me to be more present, not just for myself, but for them. So, I think I was fortunate. I had a really nice kind of rah-rah squad that was like, you're going to be okay, and that helped me when I didn't necessarily feel the same way. Like I was still kind of like, oh, how's this going to be?
Well, it's so funny because there's a time I can think of specifically. I was working for a very large company. I was working, man, I was easily doing 12-hour days, and majority of it was on my feet. And I had
Oof.
gotten to the point where I didn't realize this, and I didn't dawn on me till later. But like when I wasn't working, I wasn't talking because I
Mm.
was so tired, I guess. But basically, when I would go out and
That's
hang out with friends, I would just sit
relatable.
there. I didn't notice this like
Yeah.
at all. My weight went down very far. I got down to like a size 202, which is really tiny. Um, but again, like I didn't think anything of it because I was so wrapped up in the work that I was doing. And to kind of quote your family, because I was starting to think about leaving, I was trying to figure out what my next leap would be. And I felt like I knew it was probably going to be untraditional in some way. And I remembered having the conversation with my parents because I had never quit a job without having another job, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I knew that there was a bigger issue at play when I was having the conversation. And I remember very specifically my parents saying to me, um, something along the lines, I'm gonna have to paraphrase, but it was something along the lines of quitting doesn't make you a failure. Like, it's okay to quit this job.
Yeah.
Like, we have faith in you. Like, and it's so funny because at the moment I was shocked. I was like, I can't, to your point, like I thought for sure they were going to come back and be, girl, you do not have it. Like, what are you doing? You have a good job, you have good benefits. Like, you need to figure some things out, but like, don't leave. And the message I got was quitting doesn't make you a failure.
Yeah.
And in a
Yeah.
weird way, like I hadn't even thought of that as
Yeah.
an issue. Like but I think giving that permission, like in a weird way, I kind of got permission to go do something that I thought was crazy and I can't believe I'm going to do this. And it's so funny because it wasn't until like about a month later, I was hanging out with friends again and somebody said, "Oh, you've come back." And
Aw.
but it was like, and I was like, what are you even talking about? And that's when they kind of came and they were like, you didn't even realize it, but like you were physically here, but you were never mentally, emotionally here. And I didn't realize how many people were actually really worried about me. And it's kind of one of those things, because I talk about it in the book, like when you're burnt out, you rarely see that you're burnt out. And like you're going to make choices with a very altered lens and you're going to feel super justified and you think you're doing the right things. And this is a reminder of why having that squad, having that community around you to like love you, support you, and say, hello, or and to say that, say, hey, choosing a different path doesn't make you a failure in this one. It's just a pivot. All it
Yeah.
is a pivot.
Yeah.
Your story, like it resonates with me. I have no doubt it will resonate with a lot of other people. But it's so hard. I think the hardest part is that it took us to get to a place where we were really not okay before we made that pivot. So I'm assuming some of what you're doing now is trying to help people maybe identify this before they get to the stage of like critical mass.
Yeah, yeah, 1,000%. And I'll say this too, for me, a lot of this work has sort of come to this place of me realizing I can't blame any one environment, because I don't think any place takes what you're not willing to give.
Yeah.
And this crystallized for me day one. Like day one, I'd left, I'm waking up for the first time. I don't have anything kind of full time. And immediately I start making a to-do list, right? Like, who do I need to call? Like, I got to prepare for this, the office. I need
Oh,
to
come
rearrange
on. It's
the
like, but it's
office.
ingrained in us. Like
Yeah, I'm
this
like, I
is
need to do all these things. And I'm like, girl, you are the problem. Like,
not even, but not even as just like Americans, because it's
yeah,
in us as Americans, like you must do. If you don't do, you are not productivity, like
uh,
you are lazy. Like that's a narrative that has to change. That if you're not constantly doing, you're lazy. But then also I think as women, I think that's part of how we're trained a little bit too. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I think too, in sort of like diving into this issue, I am realizing there's so many, there's cultural, there's gender,
Yeah.
there's birth order. Like there are so many reasons why we kind of approach, work this way. But I mean, it certainly was a moment for me, like a moment of gravity of like, oh, wait a minute. Like you have to address you. You have to learn how to say no to you. Not everything is urgent. Not everything requires you to like jump in immediately, pace, like you don't have to rush. I mean, all of that were things that I had to learn before I could be healthy in any other environment. Even as
Yeah.
an entrepreneur, even as a business owner with clients, like I have to learn how to say no to myself, to just preserve time. Not every minute of the day needs to be scheduled.
Is this episode hitting a nerve? Are you facing complex people challenges and have tried leadership books, workshops, and the advice from everyone, and somehow it's still not working? Now imagine having a trusted leadership partner who understands your specific challenges and strengths. My one on one leadership program provides the support you need with a customized plan. If you'd like to learn more, click on the link in the show notes and book some time with me. I'll explain how it works. Now back to the show. I think the statement I want to come back to is when you said people don't take what you're not willing to give, and so it's so funny because I have been working with a lot of younger people, and I find that in an effort to like go out and do a great job and to blow people's socks off, that they completely say yes to everything and then have no boundaries whatsoever because they're being taught to go and to, exceed expectation every time, but not understanding that in some corporate spaces that you have just established your baseline, which means if you are working 60-hour weeks just to give what you're giving today, well, they're going to expect more of you next year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even more of you the year after that, and more of you the year after that. And
Yeah.
how do we get comfortable with saying a B job is okay?
Yeah.
Like, I can show up and do a great job, still maintain boundaries, like have a hobby.
Yeah.
That sounds like nothing, but and I think you're nodding your head. I didn't have hobbies.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if I read a book, it was because it was a book club assigned to something at work.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I did certain things, it was because it was naturally tied to something that conveyed to work. And I think that is something I wish and I'm glad you're doing the work of how do we start to say, what am I willing to give? Because they can't take what you're not willing to offer.
Thousand.
Um,
And I think there's so many reasons for that, right? Because you think about it, one of the first questions we ask a kid is like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that becomes sort of the definition of who you're going to be, throughout adulthood. So we enter careers as almost this kind of all-encompassing, this is now the thing, right? And I think a lot of young people, I know I was said young person going into the workforce, thinking I was going to find all of my satisfaction, all of my happiness, all of my identity in my career, and I started out as a lawyer, and was
yeah.
quickly disabused of this thought that it was going to be all
I
the
have
things.
lots of lawyers in my life. And I was like, when you were like, I was like, oh, that's not a stressful career or, demanding, unrealistic career
Yeah, I mean,
choice
it's
at
like,
all.
you see it on TV, you think it's one thing, go to law school, it's very different,
It's
and
not
you
law.
get
What do you mean? It's not Law and Order?
it's not at
Did
all.
you?
Or
And
like
then you did journalism, which of course,
yeah,
a much easier path to navigate.
right. Yeah, easy peasy. But it's just like you get into these careers and
Yeah.
you think that they're going to be all these things. And I remember I worked for this fantastic judge one time and I don't know, 27, like just lamenting on like, oh, I just don't know if this is it. And she's like, you cannot think everything that you need is going to be here. And I remember at that juncture in my life, that gave me such permission to say, I was still very much a writer at heart. And I was like, let me go join some local writer groups, and that ended in me meeting wonderful poets and artists in my community. And all of these things sort of opened up. Then it became so much more tolerable, and also in some ways gave me permission to be okay saying no in certain environments when something was too much or something that I didn't want to do, because it didn't feel like I was moving in scarcity. Like if I lost this, I would lose everything. There were other
Yeah.
things to me.
So as you have done the work that you're doing, so especially because and this could apply to anybody. So I almost feel like we have two people we could play with. So people who are new in their careers. What does the healthy ambition look like for people who are just starting their careers, who are just trying to like that new person? They're in their 20s, they're like wanting to kill it, but like they don't know. And especially because the world is changing a lot around us. So for a new person, what would healthy ambition mean to them?
Yeah, I think this begins before you even say yes to the job, right? I think that this begins with you going into any career or any job or any path with a clear like picture of what you want. Like I always say, I'm from Queens, like it's the what's in it for you, like question. Just ask yourself what's in this for me. And if it's title, if it's kind of growth, that's okay too. But you want to have clear metrics for
Mm-hmm.
what these spaces are doing to sort of fulfill you, right? And fulfill your definition of success, because that gives you agency to look critically at the opportunity and determine, hey, maybe this isn't for me. or maybe this is a right now job, right? Versus a job where I'm going to invest 10 years of my time or 15 years of my time. So I think that's sort of the first step, and one thing that I love to do kind of on social media and TikTok too is just vet job postings because I think that there are always signs, in job postings of environments and
Yeah.
organizations that just may not be the right fit, especially if you're looking for more balance. I love the flag small but mighty. I think it's great when we're talking about individuals that are small and mighty, but when you're talking about teams, that could be a sign of a lack of resources, right? You want to think about those things. Other duties as a sign, maybe it's not so clear of what they need from you, but you really start taking agency and ownership of that sort of search process.
Yeah.
Because I know that we like to say that people in early career, they have so much to learn, but they also have a lot of talent and a lot of potential, a lot of promise. And no matter how old you are, you should own your time and what you spend it doing. So for me, it's so important for folks that are at the start to remember that you are interviewing a job, you are vetting a career just as
Yeah.
much as it's vetting you.
I love that because that is something I think old school mentality is like, no,
Yes.
we are interviewing you. You are lucky if we hire you. I
Yeah.
think new mentality is it is an assessment both ways, and it is determining if it is a fit both ways. Another one you talk about things when people say, "Oh, that's like a red flag," is if they keep referencing we're a family.
Oh, yes.
Yep. I figured I'd get that response from
Yeah.
you. So, um, and I would like for new people, and it's the same thing. I would encourage them. Do you have something like is working out very important to you? What are non-negotiables that in your life? So when you say what's in it for you, also personally, like what is a non-negotiable for you personally? Is it that you need to exercise? Is there a passion you have? Like for you, it was writing. Um, like are there things that you just need to be made space for?
Yeah.
Um,
It could take the shape in so many spaces. I
yeah.
mean, for that, a big part of it too is family. Like I want to be here. I'm very acutely aware we have a big age gap between our littlest and our oldest. My littlest is 8, so I'm watching my 17-year-old getting ready to fly and very aware that, my 8-year-old is not too long until he's there too. So it's important at this juncture in my life to be present for these moments, and I think, for me, any job, any opportunity that doesn't allow for that is not the right one for me.
Yeah. So I don't have family here. I do not have kids, and I'm not young by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not that old, but I'm not that young. But like for me, non-negotiables is I volunteer a great deal. And there's certain things for me to build my community here and to feel engaged in the space that I'm in because I don't have brothers and my nephew's not here and my parents aren't here. So to your point, it's going to look different for each person.
And no,
But
none is more or less valid. I love my dog. I need to walk with her a couple times a day. That's important, like there's just, what's important to you is important to you.
correct. And I think that that would be something that I would absolutely tell a new young person coming into a work environment or a new leader. Because I feel like leadership sucks even more of your life that you're not really anticipating. If you've never been in leadership before, I always love the conversations with new leaders because they think it's going to be one thing. You can see it, you can hear it in what they're saying. And then once they get into the role, it's like they've been hit with like a reality stick and they're like, is this really what I signed up for? And you're like, yes. Yes, it
Yeah.
is. And so, because what happens is you're not just doing a job. You now are managing people, which is also taking on so much, which again, they take what you give, but the emotional weight of your team. How do
Yeah.
how are they doing? What do they need? Am I showing up for them in a way that helps them grow, develop, thrive in their environment? So what causes you stress and what will keep you up at night may be different than if
Yeah.
you're in an individual contributor role.
Yeah.
Because I
Especially
don't think people think about that part of it in the same way.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially I think when you want to lead intentionally and with empathy, but at the end of the day, as a leader or as anybody really, you're an agent of the business that you represent, and I think that's often, just a difficult sort of hurdle to show up completely human in those spaces. I've always found leading with transparency is probably the best sort of gateway to that. Like,
Yeah.
I remember years ago working with a leader who liked to, I can't remember what she used to refer to her team as, but it was something very baby, I forget what it was, but it was almost like kids to a parent sort of, dynamic. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's not the best way to look at your team and your crew. We're all in this as a transaction. It's people's livelihood. It's okay to let people know kind of, what's going on with the business or kind of things that would jeopardize their livelihood. Not always the easiest in certain environments to lead with that level of transparency. But I've found that the more transparent we can be as leaders, the easier it is to lead from a place of humanity.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing I would say to new leaders is um, find someone who has a leadership style and a balance that you would like to emulate.
Hmm.
So find a mentor, like, and ask them if they would mentor you.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I think if you, again, and this is part of building that professional community, that network that will hold you in check and, kind of gut check you when you're not showing up as the way you want to show up. Because
yeah,
it'll happen.
yeah,
It'll happen. You're going to get sucked into a vortex where you're going to lose track of your boundaries. And that's where having the right people around you, I know becomes really, really important.
yeah,
But I also think like don't take for granted having good mentors and asking them how they navigate those tough decisions of when you want to say no
yeah, yeah,
and but you're feeling pressured to say yes.
yeah.
So that way you're not having to necessarily navigate it all on your own. You have another voice that you can leverage and someone who has more experience than you to maybe help you navigate a challenging moment.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah, I do think it, as a leader, specifically speaking of boundaries in particular, like it's imperative, I think, for leaders to model good boundaries, between work and themselves, but it's not always the easiest to do because I think especially many of us that are of a certain generation, are so used to like kind of the all-in school of like success. Like I have to show that I can do all the things and be all the things. But also as a woman of a certain age, I adore and love the power of a good no at this juncture in my career. It doesn't
I
have to
think
be
we're the same age level,
yeah,
and I do think there comes for lack of a better term, ballsiness,
yeah,
boldness, because like I have no problem saying no now.
yeah.
20 years ago, I had a hard time saying no. 10
Oh,
years ago, I had a
gosh,
hard time
like,
saying
yeah,
no.
getting ready to say it.
And so that's where I think like for younger people,
Yeah,
and to your point, like, and I think it depends. Like, I was in a very male dominated space early on in my career. So, being a woman, you felt like you had to go even above and be like you had to go so much further. Um, but if I could have had someone, like, if I could have had an older leader who happened to be a female to be like, how do you do it? Like, how do you maintain credibility and hold your ground?
yeah, yeah.
Because
I
that is
probably actually have a
so
sort of a
hard.
for the nose. Like I think I call them the three C's. You want to be clear, you want to be compassionate and you want to be collaborative. Like
Yeah.
you clearly have to say no. You can't say maybe, I don't know, like,
Yeah.
it has to be a no, but I think that if you're compassionate, like understanding the necessity or the need and maybe offering an alternative, but it's so important to own those no's. Like it's just so important, and I think the more it's a muscle. I think the more you say it, the easier it gets. And I know as a leader, I've always respected it. Whenever I've had someone say, "Hey, this can't be done in this timeline," what if we X or what if we do
Yeah.
this? I listened, because a lot of times leaders aren't in the weeds. So they may not be aware of all the nuances and all the details that go into getting the work to be done. So sometimes a no is also just a smart business move too, and it'll earn you respect, but don't be afraid of it.
And again, I think if it's a skill you learn now, a behavior you learn now, it will make life so much better for you. Learn from us.
Yes.
Just saying.
No.
And so I want to ask one. So we talked about new leaders. So I want to jump into like a more established leader. So someone who might be more in our age range, and I like how you say that of a certain age. But people who are in it now and do not have that healthy, they have the ambition, but they don't have the healthy life.
Yeah.
So not everybody can just quit and like move on. So like what would you encourage people to do who are like, I'm drowning right now. I know change has to happen. I just don't see how it's possible.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
would you advise those people to do?
I will say, I feel like we get stuck in that I don't know if it's possible loop for a really, really long time. And to me, that time could be valuable planning time, right? If you don't have the ability to just make the leap, I like to say that I leapt, but I planned. Like I also, for a couple of months, was thinking about it, and it was well timed for me. I sent out some emails and found out if there were consulting opportunities. Like I was making sure I was setting it up for me, to make sure that I would still have a solid financial foundation for my family and that wouldn't be too disrupted by my decisions. So I would say begin to create an exit plan, right? Like if you've done
Yeah.
the work, you've gotten to the point where something needs to change, whether it's just misalignment, or being in a space that feels toxic. I mean, there's very reasons why we feel like we have to move. And I think discomfort is always the telltale sign, before it hits you over the head and you end up in the hospital, but you start to feel it, it for a little bit before you get to that point, but just start thinking, okay, I want to make a move. For me, the first step is always financial. Like, again, work is a transaction. We're in it because we're getting paid, so start thinking of what are the
What do
things
you
that
mean? Isn't it your passion project? Like pushing
should be
paper?
both.
Isn't
It should
that?
be both.
I mean, it can be for some people.
Yeah,
Like, I think you get very
yeah,
lucky, but like, you're like, no, it's a trade. I always laugh because I think
uh,
people forget that.
yeah. I
I,
do. I
I think
really,
we forget that like part of work is an agreement. I do this for you. You pay me as a result. This is
yeah,
not my life's like it, and it doesn't have to be your life's mission.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the
Like,
beautiful thing is when it does feel fulfilling and great, it's the most amazing thing in the world too, but you also want your paycheck. So,
so remember, start there. Like, this is a
yeah.
financial agreement.
This is it, and start to think of what do I need to do to be comfortable? Like
Yeah.
is it kind of a certain savings threshold? Do I want to feel like I have a certain level of maybe contract opportunities lined up? Am I thinking of monetizing a hobby or a passion? But start to build a financial foundation. The next for me is I am such a firm believer in networking. I network across, I network up aspirationally. I love meeting people. I love talking to people and I love staying in touch with people. So like I said, when I first was kind of contemplating this decision, my first step was to send an email out to my network like, hey, thinking about learning what it could be like to consult. Here's my skill set. Do you know anybody that can utilize that? And from that email, I got two fantastic opportunities that really laid a foundation for me feeling comfortable to sort of take the leap when I was ready to go. So I would say just make networking a strong part of what you're doing and network outside your industry. I think sometimes, I worked in two particularly kind of small industries in like kind of the health law space and then again in health and wellness media, and it felt very small. Like it felt like I kind of knew everybody at a certain point in those environments. And it was really important to me to start to meet people outside of that because a lot of my skills were transferable and you just have to sort of be open to like you never know like kind of what your next step is going to look like. So for me that ended up working out beautifully. I just started doing things that were outside of law, outside of media that could utilize my skill set that were fulfilling, also provided that paycheck, but
Yeah.
that came from starting that foundation and basis of networking. And I would say, the other thing, especially if you're someone at a current juncture in your career and you're used to the titles and all of the things, there's a lot of humility too. Like there's a lot of humility that you have to kind of prepare yourself for and prepare yourself to exercise because I think for better or worse, we lean in a lot to that external validation that comes with saying, I'm the hottie toddy VP of whatever, and being able to introduce yourself that way. If you're planning on kind of moving out of those spaces into things that are more aligned, with what you want to do, or otherwise, sometimes those accolades stop, and the people being impressed stop. And, you have to be okay with the quiet that comes with that a little bit,
Yeah.
and get comfortable with your own kind of, own happiness and your own like being proud of yourself, and all of those things. But I think those were the things that probably hit me in the face the quickest, like the finances, the networking, and then of course that piece about getting comfortable with the quiet.
Yeah, I think that's all really good. I would same network. Like you have spent a lifetime building up meeting people. LinkedIn is the best place, but I mean, I think the two things that you said that I resonate well, three things. The two things I would say is know your network and really keep your network healthy. Two, the humility piece is huge, especially if you're trying to go out on your own.
Yeah.
Um, I will say working for myself has been the hardest job I've ever had, by far, harder
Yeah.
than any boss I've ever worked for. And I'm the boss.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just because like it's all on you.
Yeah.
Girl, you better love IT, you better love marketing, you better love,
All of it.
accounts payable, you better love accounting. Like, because all those, unless you can afford to outsource those things, it's all you. And so there's going to be a lot of humility in figuring things out, making mistakes, a lot of mistakes, and then figuring it out. And then the last one I think too is understand, like, before you make a leap, what is the thing that's going to make you feel okay
Yeah.
making the leap?
Yeah.
But if you're not looking to leave, I would say those same things apply.
1000%.
Because, one, you can leverage your network to start looking for your next opportunity. Sometimes, and again, kind of talking about stepping into leadership, if you did get into leadership and decide it's not for you, maybe it's taking a lateral or a step back.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
either within your company or within another organization, is being able to say, I don't want this. So if
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
want this, what is the alternative? It may not be as sexy. It may not sound as good. It may not look as sweet on the card or whatever it is, but it's understanding to get you the life that you want. Sometimes we have to be so clear about what we don't want.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that
It
becomes
takes a
really
lot.
important.
Yeah, it takes a lot of bravery. I remember years ago when I was practicing law, I had a colleague that was sort of promoted to more of a supervisory role, and it was very meeting heavy. This was still, I was fairly early in my career, so I hadn't had any leadership roles yet. But she had this coveted, kind of leadership role. And for her, she just had this moment where she was like, I don't like sitting in meetings. Like, I liked the work that I was getting to do with clients and like all of those things. And she took a step back. And I remember it was like, can you believe she did this thing? And now older, I'm just like, that was amazing and brilliant that she did that for herself because she knew that that just wasn't what she
Yeah.
wanted. And I think, she was just prepared to make that shift and that change. And I think there's no shame in that. There's no shame in that.
Well, and there's organizations I've worked for that, and I think a lot of it depends on the company you're with and the culture and how they embrace that. But I worked for one organization where I can think very specifically there was a woman who promoted into a more senior position. And roughly around that time, her husband got ill. And so she was not able to show up for her family well. She wasn't showing up for her work well. And so what they ended up doing is she just moved back. And so, and if you in one, they didn't advertise. So if you didn't know about her husband, it just looked like she promoted and she sucked at her job.
Right. Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
truth of it is I think they unanimously came together and basically there was able to have a great conversation and say, hey, how do we make this work for everybody?
Yeah.
You were great here. This role allows you to be who you need to be here and there. And so I would encourage people, like if you find yourself in that situation, and not necessarily a sick spouse or anything, but you're over your skis, like it's too much. You're finding yourself starting to get sick. Just saying, telltale signs are there. Like if you have the migraines that happen all the time, or you have to travel with Tums or antacids of some kind, or ibuprofen because the headaches are always there. Like those are signs, my friend. I just want to put it out there. Like that's not normal. And you know
Yeah.
how I know? Because I did it.
Yeah.
I had the travel size ibuprofen and a full size of Tums, and I would pop both of them. Like God knows what I did to my insides for a
Yeah.
period of time. But the point being is sometimes it's about having an honest conversation with your leader and maybe like your HRBP and say, what other opportunities? Here are my strengths. Here's what I want to do. I don't think I'm in the right place right now. I want to shift. And and again, I would maybe start leveraging my network. But if you like where you are and they feel that you feel like they value you too, don't be scared to ask what else is there. Because the last thing I would want anyone to do is to burn out so brightly that the alternative is they're going to let you go
Yeah.
because you're not showing up for anybody.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I once worked with this amazing HR leader who the company was in a period of transition, and she had someone in her downline who was like, I just can't handle like all of the uncertainty. Like, I don't know that I could sort of ride this out. And at the time, she was like, I will support you in whatever you need. I'll write you recommendation letters. I'll help you find people in my network. And I remember just as someone witnessing this, as someone who was lateral to her, I just thought that was like such a beautiful gesture and such a human
Yeah.
gesture. I mean, it gave her time to find someone to backfill the role, but it also gave her time to sort of respect, the honesty of this exceptional employee who just knew that she had sort of reached her limit. So, I think we should constantly be taking inventory of kind of where we are, and whether or not we're sort of moving in alignment with what we need and what we want in our careers. I think, especially in corporate culture, sometimes that's hard. You're in back-to-back meetings, you're working all the time. And to your point, you were saying at night you were like kind of a zombie. I had a similar experience. I have like a favorite chair in my bedroom, and I would just like kind of zone out at the end of the night, like completely kind of pass out. I think that's why sometimes these intentional pauses are really important too. But
Yeah.
we should all be taking time to sort of think through what's happening. Where am I? What am I doing?
Oh my God, Faye, this has been so wonderful. And I'm so grateful because you and I've talked before, but like there's so many things more that came out in this conversation. I'm like, oh God, we've lived a similar life. And and we're completely different parts of the country, completely different industries. But it's scary how it can show up when you don't make yourself a priority in your life. And it can happen so fast if you're not paying attention. And so that's why I think what you're doing is so important. And I'm so incredibly grateful that you came and shared some time with us today. It's going to be in the show notes, but if people wanted to reach out to you to connect, learn more, just be a part of your network, because you're pretty freaking awesome, where would you like them to go?
Yeah, so I have a great newsletter on Substack called What If It All Works Out? So that's my musings. I interview fantastic people. So if you want to take a look at that. But otherwise, my company is Culture and Quill, but you can find me on LinkedIn. Part of doing this work is I've just met so many incredible people like us who've had these stories, who've thrived through them and done amazing things on the other side. So happy to hear from anybody.
Well, thank you so very much. And who knows, maybe we'll try to get you back on for some fun conversations. I like to bring back people just because anytime I meet folks, I'm like, what else can we talk about? Who can we pull together? Just because I know who typically the listeners love to hear. And so who knows, we'll have you back. I feel it. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of We've All Done It. I know your time is valuable. That's why I am for as little BS as possible. Hopefully today's episode has sparked some new ideas for you. If you would like to learn more about the We've All Done It leadership framework or how to work with me, please check out my website at kimberlyjbenoit.com. Until next time.